Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. We were not trying to do this joint. We're not thinking about doing this joint until we start doing this joint. Because we are out of town. We're not trying to be commercial. This is just where we at. This is the 24 hour. This is the 24-hour spot. So this is where we at. Not trying to bring out hardware because this is the 24-hour spot. And we're in the 24 hours right now, in the thick of it. In the madrugada. Beauty. So, it's actually copacetic vibe at the moment. There's activity, but it's comparatively quiet. So, we out of town too. This ain't where I stay. So, lightweight on the P's and Q's, but at the same time, we in the roads of creation, walking with the Most High, humble as we can be, recognizing we can't cover everything. So we go in faith and heedfulness. So all that being said, like I said, wasn't trying to do this joint, wasn't thinking about doing this joint until we do this joint. And here's what we shared the moment. What we recognize, what we learn. Do I begin by being honest, by being candid? The spot where I'm at, there are a lot of young women, and it's difficult to perceive a lot of very attractive young women, and that's not a new thing per se in my experience, in terms of just residing near a lot of places where there are a lot of young attractive women. But what it occurs to me is how difficult for a young man particularly not to have a lot of sex every day with very young attractive women. How implausible it would be for that not to happen. But what also I'm aware of, particularly in the past day, is that we received some quotes about the price. Literally, 15. They say 1.5 bands for a moderate objectifying experience, which just reveals the whole price scale, which can be expected 5 to 10 bands for a premium experience, and even 5-10 times that amount for additional joints. So anyways, either $1,500 up front or an arm and leg at the back end, literally. And if not, and not necessarily a man's own arm and leg, it might be somebody else's in his life's arm and leg, or maybe a kidney. Nasty business. This is what we observe, reading through the lines. So that helps to discern how brethren are not having sex, because brethren are terrified, just even on having one experience, seeing the consequences and being yo, serious. Meanwhile, the game continues. So this is what we observe while sitting here, going guerrilla mode after saying blessings on natural medicine. We short like this, all about Yirgacheffi, coffee beans. It's not Flintstones chewables. These are straight from Ethiopia. Vitamins, otherwise known as coffee beans. Indeed. What's observed after about a week or so of beginning this practice is that a very effective medicinal energizing. If you think about dark roast and you think about light roast, these are raw. This is super light roast, and in the chewable form, gorilla mode style, it's a slower accumulating experience, and it's a longer enduring modest thing. Now, if I'm here in all times of the night doing this, we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, this is what's happening here. Now, what we got to share for today, for this evening, is that what we observe in civilization and world society, first of all, recognizing this is the post-democracy era. People do not believe in democracy today. I mean, people a lot of talk about it. Many people, not everybody, but many people talk about it. It is offensive, to be honest. It's frustrating because it's so dishonest, and people are so insistent upon it. And it's like it's difficult to have an honest conversation when people are so insistent about talking about something that's artificial. That being said, what we observe within the world today is that there is people talk about world war and this, that, and the other. I've mentioned the notion of like the world civil war. But here's another way of describing it. There are three factors, but two essential human factors that are vying against each other. It is the system and it is the cipher. The system and the cipher are competing against each other for dominance in human experience, behavior. And the third not to worry, we have the liquid form. All blessings said, all thanks and praise. So the third component in that vying, again, it's not human though, it's nature. And nature is ascending amidst all the competition. So those are the three components. That's the trifecta at this moment. Beyond even like a civilizational thing, because there's a lot of this is unprecedented. So again, the system and the cipher. Let's talk about what the nature of the system is. It's actually very recognizable. The system is basically just convention. It's the world imperialistic phenomenon as it evolves for the past few thousand years. So it's the governments, it's the corporations, it's the whole kit and caboodle. All the constructs that are established evolved, and again recognizing that, I mean, the decolonization of Africa is a misnomer. To fail to recognize how Europe itself is colonized is a misnomer. The notion of the Nazis being defeated and annihilated is a misnomer. It's all part of an evolved methodology of oppression and imperialism, and how with the advancement of technology it's unnecessary to have standing armies that stand over people continually threatening. And so the actual experience of imperialism and oppression is much further subtle and indirect, and further difficult to evidence and call out. The whole notion of civil disobedience doesn't work now, if it ever did, to be honest. So we can talk about civil distancing at this point, distancing ourselves from the systemic methodologies of hurting, how institutions hurt each other and hurt beings. That's the methodology. But just a little bit side noting. This is all the system. We can another way of looking at it is that might be helpful, is just saying like the old guard. So all the conspiracies, all the Illuminatis, all the secret cults, kind of, sort of. That's we're getting into the realm of the new guard and that point and the cipher. So the system is the old guard, and the system is it basically just imperialism, and it's crumbling. It's not necessarily it's not like a done deal per se, but it's crumbling, and basically the point, the objective of the imperialism and the practice of imperialism is just conquest and ruination of nature, basically. Um, so and in that process, a lot of hedonism um, that motivates that activity, and bandwagoning, and additionally, and threats and carrot sticks in that process. That's the old guard. That's the system. That's the pervasive methodology of human behavior around the world since long time civilization. Um, that's the old guard, the system. Now, when we look at the new guard, the cipher, that's this. It's the cipher. So when we're talking about cipher, we're talking about telepathy. We're talking about um, this joint here, the electronic oracle that connects the world, and it's beyond the circuitry. In addition, it's like in people's minds, um, and the control, the influence through the cipher. Now, to help break down like the nature of the cipher, to understand it further, it's a matter of recognizing like sex is a cipher, like the sex rings that people are enveloped in. Once people have sex, and then people have sex with other people, that's part of the cipher, that experience, and the collectives, um, the um, the collusions, the plotting, and additionally the clans that are cultivated from these sex rings. Um, that's one example of the experience of the cipher. In addition to that, there are other methodologies of the cipher as well. Um, and that's where it's difficult to distinguish between the cults being either the system or the cipher, because it's a blend of those things. But the point of the cipher is that it's very difficult to evidence, call out directly, because it's extremely subtle. But at the same time, it's extremely effective. It is pervasive, and additionally, and it is ascending. Science is part of this. Science is kind of like, again, has one foot in the system, but at the same time has another foot in their main. Science probably has many feet, actually, to be honest, but has another foot in the cipher as well. Um, so there a lot is already known and understood and calculated concerning the old guard and the system. There's a lot of unknowns about the cipher and how that plays out, and then because of that, how the competition between the system and the cipher plays out too. We can see the cipher as we can presume or accuse the cipher of being rebellious, of being like that revolutionary spirit, but that's a little bit, it's oversimplistic. It's applicable, but it's a little bit oversimplistic, because the cipher also includes the libertarianism, and it's not just a matter of being anti-system. It's a matter of being invested in something else distinct from the system, and some of it involves trying to conquer the system, take over the system. Some of it is just a matter of like just being hedonistic. And so, anyways, like I said, the sex rings is one way of describing it, but there are other things. I mean, drugs and alcohol and those type of scenes, those like underground kind of collectives and cultures is another element, but it's less influential, to be honest, in terms of the competition between the system and the cipher, and its influence on the aggregate of human behavior. Sex is a significant thing because it eventually, in many instances, progresses into procreation, children being born, and then that being progenerative, for better and for worse. It also involves pedophilia, and the influences within pedophilia, and in those experiences, the adults actually are the ones that are increasingly subordinated to the children, even though the adults are the ones that are abusing the children. In the cipher experience, it's the children that have the significant influence, in terms of the mind control, and additionally, without having yet established effective physical control and safety and support. So anyways, these are just some descriptions about the nature of the cipher experience. So one of the things that's a bit beneficial to recognize concerning the cipher is that Um, there seems to be somewhat of a, here come the sirens. There seems to be somewhat of a schizophrenic nature to the cipher, because on one extreme, the cipher has a very strong tendency towards justice, and like fairness, and correcting the injustices of the system and the old guard. And at the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, the system is very enveloped in nihilism. 1 second. They don't find where we at. Blessed love and peace. So, like I said, the cipher is simultaneously as a phenomenon, and obviously different individual beings within that are significantly invested in the cipher experience exist in different levels of, or different positions in that spectrum. But like I said, there seems to be a rather severe dichotomy, like we can call it again schizophrenic, to apply these psychological approximations and inaccuracies, presumptions, and judgmentalisms. But that's the frame of reference that many people have. So again, the cipher seems to have this tendency of, on one side, being severely strongly invested and devoted towards fairness and justice and reconciliation and righting the wrongs of the old guard, of the system, in an extremely even martyristic, messianic type of way, which is like, we can say it's miraculous, but we don't want that type of pain for anybody, to take on that responsibility and to take on those consequences. But that's on one side. It's just like some awesome, miraculous, amazing altruism, selflessness, and further within the cipher experience. A lot of kinfolk in terms of like the free love experience, and additionally having that yearning. Now at the same time, within the cipher experience, there's that hedonism of just like not giving a fuck about anything, and not giving a fuck about justice, not giving a fuck about injustice, but just like not even it's not even a matter of like just pursuing pleasure. It's just a matter of like, particularly oftentimes having like just an intellectual understanding of all phenomena, and that kind of spiritual awareness and awakening of equanimity, but at the same time a lack of faith, and there's empathy, but at the same time there's just like a loss of energy, and a loss of vision about like the prospect of fairness, or like the plausibility of continual fairness, and recognition of how much diligence and discipline is necessary even to experience a semblance of that fairness. And so instead it's just a matter of like, yeah, here, whatever. And when atrocities happen, it's just like, we tried to say it. So that's part of the other side of the cipher that we observe. And so amidst that, there are people who are calculating. There are people who are very ambitious within the cipher, who are trying to take, like I said, try to take over the system through either technology, extremely advanced technology, that is we can expect to be continually beyond the masses of human collective, because the type of mathematics and science, STEM knowledge, to be able to function and understand how the technology works, and to perpetuate it and to advance within it, it's beyond what we understand as the capacity of human knowledge and functionality at this moment, or even interest. And so because of that, it becomes an increasingly seclusive, even isolationary experience, but at the same time very effective, very influential, and thus effectively establishing effective, um, plutocratic type of nature, and continually dependent upon those within the hierarchy, the subordinates who kind of are the arms of the kinfolk in that respect. So anyways, that's what we observed. The system and the cipher vying with each other at this moment. Now at the same time, nature is ascending. Nature is cleansing what the empire, what the old guard has been doing, particularly over the past few centuries with science, the pollution, the poisoning, and so it doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean like that's it for the old guard or for the system, but that is part of the process. And concerning the cipher, a lot of it is just a matter of like how much the cipher sustains itself and nurtures itself. Not necessarily a matter of how much the cipher takes over the system, but how much the cipher is able to find peace and balance. The cipher has an increasing proclivity to study, to learn, to practice that balance in many ways compared to the old guard. However, a lot of the cipher abstains from having the discipline and the patience to do that study, whereas the old guard knows, because the old guard has authority. The old guard knows what the nature of authority is, that when people have authority, that means you can hardly do anything. It's paralysis, because one knows just a little step here, a little step there, huge. So that means like you're hardly taking any steps, and that's a knowledge and that's a discipline that is gleaned and continued through heritage, through inheritance, through generations. It's very difficult to acquire that knowledge in one lifetime, and not just that knowledge, but that discipline, that effective discipline to live very prudently and strictly, knowing every word a person speaks or thinks, every thought a person thinks manifests. At like serious, no cap. How about that? Now there are some methodologies. There is some guidance about how to cultivate a discipline in that respect, but a lot of that guidance involves letting a lot of that go, a lot of life go in terms of attachments and ambitions, and additionally, so that helps to calm and moderate one's thoughts and words and deeds, and the effects, the adverse effects of those deeds, words, and thoughts. Ain't no perfection per se, but that's just some of the experience. So anyways, that's cipher, and we're not going to do 5 hours here, although that would take us to daybreak. The battery situation is a thing, and also, like I said, we're in the 24-hour spot right now. So we're not trying to be on floss. We're not trying to be on blast at this moment. Anything else? That's about it. We give all thanks and praise the Most High. How about let's talk about Haile Selassie I. Let's talk about Haile Selassie I, His Majesty, and Her Majesty White Saruman, the perfect balance, King and Queen, the guidance. What does it have to do with system and cipher? Well, how about this? We give thanks because I just complete the full reading of the autobiography of His Majesty, Volume 1 and 2. So we give thanks and praise for that. I'm in the process of reading a biography about the life of Avraham Avinu at the moment. 2 written works completed within the past century, which is comparatively rare for myself. Gives insight into the nature of the sovereign mind again. it's very helpful to study stories, to listen to stories, to learn stories about personal examples and personal experiences, and to learn from those personal experiences of others. It's a very, very rich gift, treasure. So it's beneficial to be mindful of what stories we listen to in that respect. But these are very solid stories. His Majesty Haile Selassie and Abraham Avinu. So again, looking at the sovereign mindset. Talk about Haile Selassie and Her Majesty Weizar Amanin first. To be honest, this is a little bit of like a advanced reasoning without trying to sound or trying to be somewhat presumptuous or pompous or arrogant or whatever else, but the consideration is recognizing, just like with every prophet, that a lot of, or some of the things that a prophetic leader does in that lifetime is very relevant and necessary and truth within that lifetime. However, I should wrap up now because the energy here is acclimating to this to the circumstances here. So all right, I just dropped a coffee bean too. So that we're going a little bit beyond what is initially arranged. So I'll finish here, God willing, briefly, and then we'll call that a wrap for the moment. So oftentimes, and actually, to be honest, probably in every time a prophetic leader emerges, there's truth within the teachings, there's truth within the example, but there's also truth beyond the teachings and beyond the example. And some of what the prophetic leader does and says and teaches is specifically applicable to that moment. It says this within the Quran. It says this within the Gospels, in terms of referencing the teachings that precede each of those respective holy scriptures. We can see the evidence of this within the Bhagavad Gita, and each holy scripture. So that doesn't negate, that doesn't obfuscate the preceding teachings or obligations or mitzvot, but it puts things in context, because, to be honest, even the purpose of the mitzvot, discussibly, we can reason about this, is simply to direct kinfolk back to the experience of the garden, which is actually very difficult and very involved when coming from the experience of Babylon. So recognizing that, when we look at the temporal experience and the temporal teachings and example of the prophetic leaders, it's recognizing that that's what's necessary at that moment for guiding people back into that experience of garden, paradise in the earthly sense. So all that being said, that's just to preface very briefly, because we intend to wrap this up very briefly, God willing. When studying the example of His Majesty Haile Selassie, there's tremendous wisdom, tremendous truth, tremendous benefit that is shared through his example, through his words and actions, through his prayers. At the same time, some of the methodology, some of the emphasis, for example, 100 years ago, a lot of the emphasis that His Majesty articulates and manifests as King of Ethiopia is the technological advancement of Ethiopia, the modernization, the technological modernization of Ethiopia, the roads, transportation, education, constitution, resembling very much what is experienced in European civilization at that moment. Now, that was 100 years ago. And so if we were going to look at that, then the logic would be, okay, well, that means that we have to look at where technology is today, and whatever community we identify ourselves within, to emulate whatever technology, advanced technology we observe, just like His Majesty does with Ethiopia. However, again, that's somewhat of an oversimplistic kind of emulation or imitation, because it's a matter of recognizing what the priorities and what the relevance is at that moment, and then making the decisions and cultivating the discipline, doing the study, and implementing the behavior that is prudent concerning those priorities. So by that I mean this: what we can recognize today is that further advanced technology, in many and vastly many respects, is other than the priority. The priority is actually healing relationship with nature, and like recognizing that the world civilization is overdeveloped, is over technologicalized. Yes. So the guidance, the prudence, is to let go of a lot of technology, not all of it, and not to retard the certain advancements within technology, but to let go of. I mean, I'm looking at kinfolk just connected, like the point right here. How about this? To devices, and I'm just even in this evening and in the recent weeks, I'm reacclimated to that experience of just seeing people who are drunk. And I'm talking about like people who are going to the bar and everything else like that, and looking at the different levels of drunkenness. Like, and there's a point to this, and then I'll get to wrap up, God willing. There's the lower end of the there's the initial side of the drunken spectrum, which is like the happy buzz kind of experience. Then there's perhaps like the euphoria second level, which is like the love, and just like that nostalgic kind of like deep kind of affection. Then from there it can get into like anger, like in a snap, like just like, and that's where like the pains and frustrations that a person has experienced kind of like come to the surface. Then you getting further drunk, you can get into like just nastiness, aggressive, hostile, painful, crying, or otherwise further emotional. Then the next levels of the drunkenness gets to just incapacitation, just being can't do anything. And then the next stages is unconsciousness. So when looking at kinfolk on the devices here, on the technology, very similar. People's minds are being chewed. My mind is being chewed whilst I'm doing this. Just before I was doing this, it was actually rather peaceful. There was a calmness because I wasn't on any devices. It's a nighttime. There's activity, but there's not a lot of technology in terms of the oracle kind of experience. So there's a nice, healthy energy that's being experienced, mindfulness, like a sanctity of mind. We're pushing it now. We're pushing it. So we observe how, just like when looking at kinfolk who are inebriated at the bar or in like the pub scene or whatever, it's the same thing with the technology. People that are in different levels of being chewed, their minds being chewed by the technology, being at different levels of incapacitation, being at different levels of functionality, with and without the technology. And in each of those stages, people have different receptivities towards communication, of even being told what's going on. Because trying to talk to somebody, some cat who's like in the latter stages of inebriation at the pub or whatever, it's no use. Like, the cat's not listening. They're gone. So same thing with the technology. Like some trying to talk with certain cats who's enveloped in the technology, is gone. So anyways, point being here is that there's an overdevelopment. There's an over-technologicalization of world civilization. And so rather than what Haile Selassie I does, His Majesty, a century ago, in terms of endeavoring to modernize things or bring things into the postmodern era, it's a matter of guiding things into a healthy relationship with nature and also technology. So it's that's what we're talking about in terms of looking at the example and then applying the deeper and the transcendent guidance and teaching and truth to our contemporary conditions. And that's where we have to go, and we have to stay beyond just rote imitation and just saying, okay, this is what is done, this is how we have to do now, and to go deeper, to understand the spirit of the teachings and then how that applies to the letter of today. So that's one thing concerning His Majesty Haile Selassie, and again, continually the perfect balance with Her Majesty Waizara-Manen, because that is such an essential thing, particularly when we're talking about relationship, particularly when we're talking about nature, particularly when we're talking about the source, the provision of the nutrients that sustain us in this life, that allow us to go guerrilla mode. Big up Ethiopia. Anyways, so that's mindfulness. Now with Avraham Avinu, there's a very specific narrative that's very rich about how Avraham Avinu cultivates and experiences a sovereign mindset that is different from the norm of everyone around him, even his own father, his own far, in the culture of idolatry in Babylon and the surrounding area. How he is secluded for the first 13 years of his life in a cave to avoid death and persecution amidst that culture. And then from there, here we go. Yeah, all right, it's time to wrap up. The cosmos is letting us know that we're getting into the depths of the night, and now it's time to wrap up. So, but Avraham Avinu lives in a cave for 13 years, first 13 years of his life. Then from there studies, and it goes through a process of spiritual logic, not just a matter of being told certain things and then just accepting it, but looking at things himself and just thinking, recognizing for himself, like, yo, that doesn't make sense. That's just don't make sense. So, very logical methodology, and from there, a spiritual awakening. An attuneness to a phenomena that exists beyond the evident, the temporally evident. It's an honesty that acknowledges possibility, all possibility, and then plausibility, and then purpose, and relationship, and discipline, daily. So, and then from there, sharing. So again, it's very beneficial to listen, to learn the narratives, the daily behavior, and then apply that daily behavior to our own conditions and circumstances in life. So, for that, we give all thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim. Respect and honor to all our ancestors, all our prophets, and all our sages, past and present, known and unknown. Respect and honor to His Majesty Haile Selassie and Her Majesty Waizara-Manen. Perfect balance of husband and wife. Respect and support to all our progeny from the first Siete years to the next Siete generations, door for door. One heart, one mind, one love supreme, with blessed love and peace in Rastafari. In Rastafari.